On the ACT, there are 5 different kinds of math problems that you can expect to see. And the mistake that a lot of students make is that they don't study for all 5 of them. So here's an example of every type of math problem you can expect to see on the ACT. So the first type of problem on the ACT is just called a number and quantity, which is just about numbers. And apparently that includes imaginary numbers as well. This is one of those things that you might not remember how to do, but once you do remember, it'll be really easy to solve in the future. So for this problem, it tells us that I is the square root of -1. That's just a standard math thing for imaginary numbers. And it wants us to find the square root of 4 plus the square root of -9. Well, the square root of 4 is not that bad because that's just a regular square root. It's what number you have to multiply twice to get 4. And in this case, that's 2, because 2 times 2 is 4. And that's just going to be plus whatever the square root of -9 is. So I have a feeling it's going to be either C or D. I can't imagine it being A or B. So what is the square root of -9? Well, we have the square root of -1. So let's split this up into 2 square roots, one of them being the square root of -1. So we can split this up into the square root of 9, positive 9, times the square root of -1. This is how you do any negative square root. So the square root of 9 is 3, because 3 times 3 is 9. And the square root of -1, the problem says, is the letter I. And in algebra, you don't have to put multiplication signs, you can just put them next to each other. So the square root of 4 plus the square root of -9 is 2 plus 3i, and that is going to be answer choice C. So that's the answer to this problem. So this is the second problem. If you want, you can try to work this out on your own, maybe pause the video and try it. While you're doing that, in the meantime, I want to show you something cool that might help you if you're struggling with math and stuff. It's called Brilliant, and this is what it looks like right here. Basically, it just guides you through math lessons. It tries to make it fun and not like you have to do this, right? And that was already good. That was already amazing as it was, but they actually just made it even better with what they're calling the new Brilliant. And basically, they added a super intelligent personal tutor into their math lessons. So here's an example of how it works. This is a problem about exponents, and let's say that I don't know the answer. Well, it looks like I got it wrong, so I don't know what to do. So I'm going to consult the tutor, which is this little green guy, and I'm going to ask him to help me. And you'll see that he doesn't just tell me what the answer is, he guides me through the problem. And with this newfound knowledge, I can go ahead and reattempt the problem, and you'll see that we got the right answer now. If this all sounds interesting to you, you can click the link below or scan the QR code to get started with Brilliant's tutor for free. You can upgrade to Premium to unlock all the courses, and right now you can save 20% off an annual subscription by going to brilliant.org/numbernerd. Thank you to Brilliant for sponsoring the video. I really appreciate it. And now let's get back to that algebra problem. So I don't know if you tried this problem on your own. If not, that's fine. We have a system of equations, and we need to find the value of y. So normally you have to find x and y, but it's saving us time. We just need to find y. Now there's 2 main methods to do this. There's substitution and elimination. I'm noticing that the bottom numbers are always doubled from the top numbers. So I think it'll actually be easier to do elimination. The goal of elimination is to add up these 2 equations so that it eliminates a variable. And because we're trying to solve for y, I think we should try to eliminate x. Because if we eliminate x, then there will just be y left over and we can solve for it. So I would suggest that you always ask yourself, it would be really convenient if these numbers were what? Usually you want to start with a small number. If this number was what number, it would be really convenient. And personally, I think if this number was a 4, it would be really convenient because we would have a 4x and a minus 4x, and then those would eliminate, and there would only be the letter y. So how do we get from a 2x to a 4x using multiplication? Well, we have to multiply by 2, because 2 times 2 is 4. But we can't just multiply this number by 2. We have to do it on both sides of the equation. So I'm going to multiply this entire equation by 2, and we'll see what happens. So 2 times 2x is 4x. 2 times y is 2y. And 2 times 1 is 2. So we've multiplied this equation by 2, and now this other equation, we haven't done anything with it. So it's just going to stay exactly the same. And now we can add these 2 equations together. So 4x minus 4x, that cancels out to 0. That was our goal, right? But then here we have 2y minus 2y. Well, those actually cancel out as well. We didn't mean to do that, but it just happened. So I guess we cross these out too. So this entire left side of the equation is just going to be 0. And then we add up 2 plus 7. 2 plus 7 is 9. So after doing elimination, we have ended up with 0 equals 9. Well, that doesn't make sense. 0 does not equal 9. Did we do something wrong? Well, no. We tried to eliminate one letter. We ended up eliminating both. So no matter what you plug in for x or y, you're always going to get something that's not true because 0 does not equal 9. So in this case, the answer is actually D, no solution. There is no way to get both of these equations to be true. Okay, this is the third category of problems on the ACT, and it's just called functions. So how do functions work? How do you do things with functions? How do you graph them? And so on. So here's an example where we actually have two different functions. We have f of x and g of x. Remember that f and g are not different in any way other than that you use them to show there are two different functions. So the first one is f of x equals 3x minus 2. The second one is g of x, which is the square root of x minus 1. But you'll notice it wants us to find f of g of 5. So the fancy term for this is a composite function, but you don't need to know that. Basically, you just need to notice that ultimately we're solving for f, right? But the number that we're supposed to replace x with for f of x is g of 5. So we actually need to work from the inside out. We need to figure out what g of 5 is, and then that will give us the number to solve the f function. So what is g of 5? Well, whenever you are solving a function with a number inside, you just replace x with that number. So I'm going to rewrite g of x, which is the square root of x plus 1. But instead of x, I'm going to write 5, which is the number in with the parentheses. And now we can just solve this. So 5 minus 1 is equal to 4. And the square root of 4, well, that's what number you multiply twice to get 4, which is 2. So 2 times 2 is 4. The square root of 4 is 2. Now remember, that's not our answer because that just tells us what g of 5 is. So if g of 5 is 2, then this is the same as f of 2. So now we have to figure out what f of 2 is, and that's going to give us our answer. So what is f of 2? Well, for this one, we're going to use f of x, not g of x, right? Because we used g last time. So f of x is 3x minus 2. We're going to rewrite 3x minus 2, but instead of x, we're going to put the number 2. So it's going to be 3 times 2, because we're replacing x with 2, minus 2. And now we can just solve this. So 3 times 2 is 6, and then 6 minus 2 is 4, which means that our final answer for the composite function is 4, and that is the letter A. Okay, let's move on to some geometry. For this, you need to just understand how different shapes work, how angles work, and things like that. And for this one, it looks like we need to know how triangles work because it says the vertex angle of an isosceles triangle is 30 degrees. And we have to find the measure of a base angle. So this is a lot of vocab, and honestly, since yesterday, I don't think I've ever heard it called the vertex angle. Maybe I've heard it called the base angle, but really I want to show you that you don't need to know what those words mean to be able to figure out the problem. The key word that you do have to understand is isosceles. An isosceles triangle is basically where you have two sides that are the same length and then a third side that's a different length. And the key thing is that's also true for the angles. You have two angles that are the same size, and then you have another angle that's a different size. So I'll just draw an example of an isosceles triangle. It's going to look something like this. I mean, this is a terrible drawing, but just roll with it, all right? So basically, you're going to have two angles, like this one and this one, that are going to be the same size. And then you're going to have this one up here that's going to be a different size. I'll put two little arcs to show that. So just based on this information, we can kind of try to figure out what these other words mean. Like when it says the vertex angle is 30 degrees, like the vertex angle, as in there's one of them. So I have a feeling that's going to be this one. I mean, I've never heard it called the vertex angle before, but it makes sense. It's saying that the angle that's by itself is 30 degrees. And here it says, what is the measure of a base angle, suggesting that there are multiple of them. And here are the two base angles right here. So how do we find the measures of these angles? Remember that they're going to be the same angle measure because it's isosceles. And you have to know one more thing about triangles. You need to know that every triangle, all of the angles inside of the triangle add up to 180 degrees. This is true for every triangle. So we could write this as an algebra problem, but like, who wants to do that? So let's just think this through logically. We have 180 degrees total, but this angle up here is taking up 30. So what does that leave for the other two angles? Well, 180 minus 30 is 150. So there are 150 degrees left for these two angles. And we know that these two angles have the same angle measure. They're exactly the same. So how do we distribute 150 degrees evenly between the two? Well, we just divide it by 2. 150 divided by 2 is 75, which means that both of these angles are 75 degrees. And it says what is the measure of a base angle? In this case, that's 75. So the answer here is D, 75. Okay, this next category is pretty different from the rest of them, but it's still really important to know, and that is statistics and probability. And I feel like a lot of students struggle with this, but if you just keep practicing this, then I think it'll start to feel really logical to you. But let's take a look at this problem. It says that Bob has a drawer with 10 socks that make up 5 matching pairs. So just think maybe five pairs of socks, and each of them is like a different color, right? So he randomly pulls 2 socks out of the drawer and puts them on. And we have to find the probability that he has picked a matching pair. So basically, he picks the 2 red ones or the 2 blue ones or whatever. I don't know how crazy his socks are. So I know this just looks like one thing that he does that we have to find the probability of, but really he's doing 2 different things. He's pulling out his first sock, and then he's pulling out a second sock, right? So we have to find the probability for both of those. Now, what you want to do is each time he does an event, you want to find the probability that it disqualifies him from completing this, right? Like if he pulls his first sock and now it's impossible to complete the challenge, then it's going to, affect the probability. So what is the probability that when he chooses the first sock that it disqualifies him from picking a matching pair? And the answer is, well, there is no probability of that, right? No matter which one he chooses, he still has a chance of picking a matching pair because every color has a matching pair, right? So his odds of staying in the game are, I guess, 10 out of 10. But really, you can just ignore this fraction because it doesn't even affect the probability. What we do care about is the second sock because that's going to determine if he's picked a matching pair or not. So it really doesn't matter which one he picked first. So let's just say that he picked a red one first, right? He picked a red sock. So now, what is the probability that the second time he picks another red sock? Well, there were 2 red socks in the drawer and 10 total. So you might think that it's 2 out of 10. But actually, remember that he pulled out one of the red socks already. So there's only one more left in the drawer. So there's only one sock he can pick that will complete this challenge. And how many are there in total? Well, there were 10, but he already pulled one out. So now there are only 9 left, which means that the bottom of our fraction is going to be 9. His chances are 1 out of 9. There are 9 possibilities, and only one will complete the challenge. And remember that we can just ignore this fraction because it's just equal to 1. It's guaranteed. So the only probability we care about is 1 out of 9. And that is answer choice A. Those are the chances that Bob succeeds in picking a matching pair. Or he can just actually look in the drawer and not pick them out randomly. That works too. So those were the 5 types of problems, but you might be wondering why there's like 3 more minutes in this video. And that's because there's one more secret type of problem that the ACT makes you do, and it's called integrating essential skills. So integrating essential skills is basically just where you take everything you've learned from previous categories and applying them to one problem. Or it makes you take a previous type of problem and then use it in a way that you haven't really thought of before. Basically, this is just where they put all of their weird problems. So this is an example of a weird problem, right? It says that given that 1 is less than or equal, I don't know what's going on, what is the greatest possible value? That's the important word here, right? The greatest value for A over B times 1 over C. This is multiplication because there's no sign in between. So I'm just going to write these fractions out because I think it'll be easier to see this way. We have A over B times 1 over C. And you'll notice that when we multiply fractions, we just multiply the tops and the bottoms. So this is eventually going to become one big fraction, A times 1, B times C. So how do we find the greatest possible value? And what is even going on up here? Well, don't get confused by all of the crazy signs and stuff. This is basically just saying that A is in between 1 and 3, because remember that the alligator chomps the bigger number. So it's chomping A instead of 1, so A must be bigger than 1 or equal to it. That's what the little line means. But the alligator would rather chomp 3 than A, so A must be less than 3 or equal to it. So A is anywhere from 1 to 3. Same with B, it's anywhere from 2 to 4, and C is anywhere from 5 to 7. Unfortunately, not 6 to 7. That's not funny. Okay, I'm going to move on. So what do we do? Just test every single combination of numbers and then just see which one's the greatest? Well, first of all, that would take a really long time. Second of all, you can't even do that because there are infinite numbers between 1 and 3. There's 2.7, there's 2.8, right? So what do we do then? Well, our next thought might be, because we want the greatest possible value, why don't we just take the biggest numbers out of all of these and use those? Wouldn't that give us the biggest value? And the problem is that bigger numbers for the letters might actually make the whole thing smaller. So what we have to do is we have to look at this fraction, turn on our like math brain cells or whatever. I don't know if I have any. And then we have to ask ourselves, would each letter be better if it was bigger or smaller? And actually, we can just use either the smallest or biggest number. So like, for example, for A, we can just use either 1 or 3. It's not going to be something like 2 because it can always benefit from either going in the bigger direction or the smaller direction. So why would we go down the middle, right? We either want to go all the way to the 3 or all the way back to the 1. So let's look at each letter individually. Let's look at the letter A. Should the letter A be as big as possible or as small as possible to get the greatest possible value for this fraction? Well, when you increase the top of a fraction, it makes the whole fraction bigger, right? Like 3 over 5 is better than 2 over 5. 3 slices of pizza is better than 2 slices. So we want A to be as big as possible. So we're going to put the number 3 for A. That's the biggest it can be. What about the letter B, right? Do we want that to be as big as possible? Well, B here is at the bottom of a fraction. And when you increase the bottom of a fraction, that would be like cutting up a pizza into more slices. You might think that more slices is good, but it's the same pizza. So when you get 2 slices of pizza, then that means the slices are smaller. So it's actually less pizza. So we don't want B to be larger because the larger that B is, the less of the value of the full fraction. So we actually want B to be as small as possible. And in this case, the smallest number it can be is 2. And that's actually the same thing for C. C is also at the bottom of a fraction. We want that to be as small as possible. And the smallest number that C can be is 5. So we've found the 3 numbers that we need. Let's go ahead and replace these letters with the numbers that we've solved for. And when we do that, we now have a fraction multiplication problem. And now we can just multiply the tops and multiply the bottoms. So 3 times 1 is 3, and 2 times 5 is 10, which means that our greatest possible value for the fraction is 3 over 10, and that is answer choice B. So that wasn't so bad, right? That was every type of problem, but chances are that when you go to actually take the test, you're going to get problems that you didn't study, right? Like it's going to happen. So what are you supposed to do if you just don't know the answer? Well, there are 5 different strategies that you can use, and you can find out what they are in this video right here. If you have any questions about what I went over in this video, you can leave a comment and I'll be sure to answer it. Thanks for watching, and good luck on the ACT. You got this.